Hey there. So I want to talk to you about due diligence. And during your period when you're buying the property, right, you have a certain amount of time for due diligence. So what are the things that you need to ask during that time? So I created a due diligence checklist here. So let's take a look at this. Now, it's not every possible thing that's imaginable, but it is a lot of them. And these are everything that I have run into, and people we work with have also come across these things. So here is all of our due diligence checklist. It's broken down by category, and we're just going to go through these one at a time and talk briefly on them. So restrictions against the property itself, against the APN, restrictions against the community. This is smaller than the city or the county. So deed restrictions may be just against your exact property or your exact neighborhood, right? It's against your APN. So this may be something where, as you're pulling the title report, this is where the stuff comes up. You can usually ask the seller or the realtor for these information. A lot of times they may not have it. They may know what's on it, but they might not have it. And they usually sometimes may say, oh, there's nothing there. And then, you come back later and you find some stuff. And here's the biggest thing that I find, where it'll say like no commercial or no business use. So those are my big red flags. And I will pass on any deal that says no business use or no commercial, even if they promise me, the city says it's fine, all that kind of stuff. Again, I've lost money doing that, and I learned my lesson there. I do no commercial and no business are a hard pass for me. But there's usually other things in these deed restrictions, and they're usually very common. Everyone, a lot of properties have them. That'll be basic stuff like you can't discriminate, against who's buying the property and things like that. But sometimes there's also, building sizing, and maybe it says you have a building that's at least 1,000 square feet, at least 4 bedrooms, stuff like that. But I would check, like, sometimes they say you have to have it all brick or all stone or, things of that nature. So this is where you want to check your deed restrictions. And I usually push to get those as quickly as I can, or I usually push to not have my EMD go hard until I get those deed restrictions. The next things are regarding HOAs or community restrictions or bylaws or architectural committees. They're called different things around the country. But ultimately, another place where I lost money and I learned my lesson, I avoid HOAs altogether. So again, you can argue that fair housing says you can do this, and yes, you can, as long as you want to go to court. And it could take 18 months, it could cost $50,000+. Or you could buy an HOA and they say nothing and they're totally cool with it, and you get your license and you're operating. And then 2 years later, an next door neighbor moves in and says, oh no, I'm going to sue that person. And they have every right to sue you. I mean, you got to go to court. Now, this could happen at any point during your business. So altogether, I avoid HOAs. Next, the city/county. And I said city/county because sometimes it may be the city, sometimes it may be the county, and sometimes it may be both. But this is where we break down planning and zoning, right? What are the appropriate zoning that I can do for my assisted living? Now, each city or county may be different on this. They may say you can do it in residential. They may say you can do it in multifamily. They may say you can do it in commercial, C1, or a number of things. Or it could be, you go outside the city limits and there's not zoning there. Or there's very flexible zoning outside the city limits. So I talk to either the city or the county, and I'm going to ask, hey, this is what I want to do. What are the zoning requirements? What zones or what type of zoning can I do this in? Let's see. And then building. So there's planning and zoning, which is where you can do it. And then building is what you want to do. So when you go to pull permits for construction or remodeling, for building, you're going to go to the building department. So I also go and I talk to them. And again, it could be the city building department, or maybe you're outside of the city and maybe it's the county to building department. So, what type of permits do I need? What does that look like? And sometimes in some places, again, you're outside of the city and there's really no building permits. That is a circumstance for some areas. And then roads, it may be a county road, it may be a city road, it may be a state road. But what are the requirements for the road? Do I have to have a permit to have driveway access there if there's not currently? If I'm like buying vacant land and there's not an official driveway, it's just, you turn onto the dirt, Do I have to go get a permit for driveway access? Or are they going to want a traffic survey? Is it a busy road where they want you to put in a decel lane, or do they want like a paint striping on these kind of things? So roads, keep that in mind. That may be something you need to talk to either the city or county about. And then flood areas, again, where you're not allowed to build in a flood zone for here in Texas. So what does that look like? And again, some areas, are you coastal? You may have more stringent requirements, and some areas are not so stringent at all. But again, you can look up like a FEMA map for flood zones, and whether it's what year flood zone it is, and that kind of stuff is available for free online. So I would look that up during my due diligence, and then just ask either the city or county, is there any applicable things for flood zones? And then drainage. Drainage goes back to, again, you're covering the dirt with the big building, and when it rains, there's no place for that water to go anymore. So it may go onto your neighbor's property, and they may want to prevent rainwater from flowing into the street or the road or your neighbor's property. So is there requirements for a retention pond or a detention pond? Things like that. So again, that's another question you want to ask. And again, if you're building or if you're buying an existing home and you're not doing an addition, that may not be applicable. The health department, it's usually your county health department, but what kind of requirements does your county health department have? And again, it may be completely different from your city or your state requirements. So I go and I talk to them also. So for me, right, they went and they came and checked my hood. And my fire marshal said I had to have fire suppression in the hood, but the county also did. So in the county, they came and checked how much airflow was coming through that hood, right? They required me to have a commercial dishwasher. Your county may or may not. They also wanted me to have a 3-compartment sink and a separate hand washing sink. So some of those things are what you can keep an eye out for. They were very specific about the temperatures of the water heaters and how quickly the water heaters are able to reheat when you use that water. So I had to get a special water heater for my building. And again, that was based on the health department's requirements, not the city or anybody else. And then again, what kind of signage do they want? Hand washing signs, employees only signs, things like that, and any other kind of documentation. So I go talk to the health department before I do my remodel for sure, because you may put in this kitchen and this quartz, and then they say, hey, by the way, you have to have a 3-compartment sink, or where's your hand washing sink? So go and talk to them before you do this stuff, and let's get these kind of things ironed out. And then the state. What state are you in? And if we're doing assisted living, there are different names for these type of licenses. It may not just be assisted living, because there's assisted living, and then there's nursing, and then there's like adult daycare. So what is your license actually called in whatever state you're in? Is it just assisted living, or is it care homes or residential care homes, or there's a variety of different names, right? And then there's there may be different types of licensing. There may be a residential care home, and then there may be like a assisted living facility license. They're same state but separate licensing. One allows you to do more end of life, more memory care, things like that, and one is more independent. So I would look at what type of licensing you have, and again, you just go to the state's website and search aging, and on the state's website, and you can pull this stuff up. The state may have requirements for your building, right? And again, each state may be different. There may be minimum sizes for bedrooms, minimum sizes for bathrooms. There may be you have to have this many showers for this many residents. You may have to have this much parking for this many residents. So there are different things that you need to look at on a state by state basis and see what is there for your state. And then what about requirements for paperwork? What kind of paperwork are they going to need you to have, right? You're going to go through and apply for a license. They're going to need specific paperwork on the building, but they're also going to need specific paperwork for your operations, and what are your policies and procedures and things like that. The fire marshal's next. So the first question is, which fire marshal are you reporting to? Who is the person or the fire department that's going to come out when you have an emergency? Is it the city fire department, or is it the county, or is there none of those and it's the state? Typically, if you're in a real small town and you may have a volunteer fire department, it may be the state fire marshal that you have to go and do these permits from. But For myself, my buildings are outside of the city's limits. So you think the county fire marshal would come, but no, the county pays the city to come. So I actually have to pull permits through the city fire marshal. So it's very important to find out who you need to talk to, which person it is, because it may not be the one whose jurisdiction you're in. They may sub that out to somebody else. So find out who you need to pull permits with and who's coming. The next thing is, once you find out who it is, here's a list of questions that you'll need to talk to them about. So what are the requirements for fire hydrants, right? Is it like 500 feet? You have to be within 500 feet of fire hydrant, or maybe are you out more in the country and there are no fire hydrants, right? There's just some places where everyone's on well and there's no fire hydrants. Are they okay with that? Or do you have to put in private fire hydrants and have a big tank and pump that feeds those? All right, what about fire sprinklers? What type of fire sprinklers do you need? And there's different types of systems, right? You can have a 13 system or a subcategory of that, like an exception is a D or an R. What category of fire sprinklers do you want? And you should know that right. You should ask that question right up the front there. Not do I need fire sprinklers, but what type of system do I need? And then fire alarm. What are the requirements for the fire alarm in the building? And egress, right? Like how far doors have to be? What are the egress window requirements? Are they requiring memory care locks, no memory care locks? Does your back fence have to always be unlocked so people can exit during a fire? Those kind of things regarding egress. Fire extinguishers, how many do they want? Do they want a specific one for the kitchen? Do they want them in certain areas? You can get all that information from the fire marshal. And then what about their engine parking, right? Do they say that you have to have a certain thickness or grade for your driveway or your road? It has to be able to support a certain amount of pounds because those fire engines are very heavy. Do you have to have a red curbs and an area for them to park? Do you need a certain area for the ambulance to go when it picks up? So I'd ask those kind of questions. And then door locks. I kind of alluded to that during egress, but are there certain things for memory care door locks, right? There are different special locking mechanisms, codes, whether they consider you R4 or I2. And then again, we talked about, do you have to have doors unlocked or locked, that kind of stuff. And then the hood suppression, when you have your kitchen, right, you're going to have a hood. Are they going to want a commercial hood, or can you have a residential hood where you supplement that with a fire suppression system? And there are brands out there like Guardian where you can literally just drill into it and hook up a fire suppression system without going full commercial on those things. So what are the requirements there? Let's see. And then utilities. Utilities are a bunch of different things depending on what your utilities are. Do you currently have utilities, or are you, again, kind of more in a rural area where you don't have the water and the sewer and that kind of thing? So let's first talk about water, right? Are you on public water? Is there city water there? Is there some other public water there? So if you have drinking water, do you also have enough water for your fire suppression? Is there enough volume and pressure for you to get what you need for your fire sprinklers? And then that kind of goes back to what type of fire sprinklers there are, right? So there's the more residential fire sprinklers and there's more commercial fire sprinklers. And the commercial ones, they require more heads to go off at one time, and they require like way more water, way more pressure. So you may at minimum need, say, like a 6 or an 8-inch line with water just to be able to service that. And if you only have a 2-inch, then potentially you don't have enough volume. And then you're talking about going back to the question here now to the fire marshal of, do I go with a tank and pump to supplement that, right? I'm using my city water to fill up a tank and then it's there to use for firefighting water. So do I have enough volume? Do I need a backflow device? When we connected to the city's line, we connected a 6-inch line for just firefighting water, right? It went to our riser room. We had to have a backflow device so that our water in our pipes can't flow backwards into the underground and go to our neighbor's drinking water, right? So backflow devices are those. I had to have a separate meter for my drinking water and my fire water. So again, are they gonna, do you have to separate those two different things? Or perhaps you don't have city water or public water and you're on a well. So I would look, do you have an existing well? And I would get a well inspection. well, how well is this well working? Are they currently using it to drink, or is it just some old well on some old farmland that hasn't been used in 30 years? Right? When you do a new well, are you going to be required to use a commercial well, or is a residential well fine? And again, I've seen it where the buildings we're putting in, we were had to do a commercial well, but other people, they have an existing well on the property and they were able to use the existing residential well. So I would look at, which one do you have to do? The residential wells are obviously much cheaper. What kind of setbacks are there for these wells? And the most common things is you can't put these wells near contaminants, right? So like if it's close to a gas station, or the most common one is it close to your septic, right? It has to be a certain amount of distance away from your septic field. And then you may be able to find out, does your neighbor have a well, or are there other wells next to you? And a lot of times these reports are online. And when you pull a permit for this, usually you drill your well, you do a water quality report, you submit all that stuff to the state, and a lot of times that's online. And you might have a next door neighbor that has a well. They might have done it in the 80s, but at least you could see like, okay, they dug 350 feet, and here where the water quality was good at that time. Or maybe you just go over there and introduce yourself and say, hey, how's your well? You're getting consistent water from it. How's the quality? Are you able to drink it the way it is? Do you have a report, of of what kind of contaminants and things that are in your water? Do you have to do like some kind of filtration RO system on this, or is it good? And then other requirements. Are you allowed to do a new well there, or are you in some other jurisdiction like the city or some other water company's jurisdiction where they require you to connect to the public water? And again, is the public water right at the edge of your property, or is it way down the road and they make you bring a pipe way down the road, which can be really, really expensive? So a lot to consider there regarding water. It is much, much easier if you have public water. All this well kind of stuff can be very, very expensive. Let's see, power is next. So who services your power, right? Is it the city? Is it the power department? Who's servicing your power, and can you get enough power? So again, like if you have some of these things, if you have to have a huge pump for, say, private fire hydrants and things like that, and it's three-phase, you may have to check and make sure you get enough power there. But if it's kind of more basic stuff, you just have a big house and nothing really new going on, you're probably fine. You may have to upgrade the transformer. I've had to do that, in a couple grand for them to upgrade the transformer on the pole next to me. But that's power. So I mean, again, you can't be off the grid. You have to run your own power, or you can't run your own power, I should say. You have to have some type of power there. And then sewer. Are you on existing sewer, or do you have to do septic? So is there a sewer available? Right? Is it already there? What are the requirements that connect to the sewer? And again, how far away is it? Is it right there at the property you can tie in, or is it a half mile down the road and the city still requires you to connect the pipe way down that way, right? So you got to ask some of these questions. And then if you're going to go to septic, so for us, the septic is permitted through the county. So is it the county? Are they going to require you to have a residential septic or a commercial septic? Most commonly, they're probably going to ask for a commercial septic. And there's not really a guideline as far as like assisted living, but there is a guideline for nursing home. And those septics are usually pretty overbuilt for what we do, but that's what I've had to do. So again, if you have to do a commercial septic, what size space do you need in your yard? So if you have a small yard and you're going to put a commercial septic in, you may not have the space for the drip filled for using that system. So I would check on that. A good rule of thumb for me is if I have an acre property, there's most likely I can fit a commercial septic on there with my big building and driveway and everything. Let's see. And then let's talk about internet or cable, right? Is there existing cable? Is it currently there under the ground? Does your neighbor have cable? Right. So if it's not available, how far away is it, and can you get it to you? If you can't get it to you, are there wireless services available? And I know some of these companies like T-Mobile and some other places where you can get like this little tower and you just plug it in. It's based on cellular. So again, I would check, right. A lot of what we do now is based on internet speed. And again, we rerun our TVs off of internet, and we run all of our tablets and everything for meds off internet. So how fast is my speed there? It's super important for me. It will be worth it just spending a couple $100 and just testing out the wireless service. See if you can plug it in somewhere, plug it in a generator, just to be able to get power out there and run this and just do some speed tests, right? Even if you had to pay for it for a month or two, just cancel it before you even bought the property. If there was no existing cable, I would do that just to make sure I could get appropriate internet speeds out there. So here's my list of due diligence. Again, this is not everything that you could come across, but this is a good amount of them. So I would ask more questions than you need to. But I would also, again, ask in a way where you are not, you're not pigeonholing yourself, right? Like, don't bring up things. It's kind of a fine line, a learning experience, right? Like, don't bring up things that are gonna add more permits to you, but you should still ask to make sure you are doing all your due diligence.